Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Pitch, a daily women's football podcast brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. Today it's brought to you by myself, Briony, and as always, my co-host, Raj.
Evening. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you.
Been fun watching the FA Cup games today. The men's FA Cup, let's just clarify.
Yeah, we've had some good results. Which result are you most excited about?
What do you think? Actually, do you know what? That's a hard one because for me, obviously, as a through and through Liverpool fan and also a coach for Plymouth Argyle, it's difficult, you know. I think the biggest result of the day has been Argyle beating Brentford 1-0. We'll take that.
We're manifesting an Argyle Liverpool fixture in the next round.
Fourth round draw.
So everyone, let's manifest that into the universe.
Well, by the time they hear this, they'll know the answer because the draw gets done tomorrow evening.
Exciting stuff.
Indeed. Anyway, we won't talk about Man United Arsenal because we don't want to manifest anything that isn't going to happen there anyway. So,
we're going to
win. Right, okay then. In today's episode and the third of our Hidden Game series, we are travelling back to the early days of women's football to uncover the stark realities faced by female players fighting for recognition in a world that dismissed their passion as unworthy. From their muddy pitches to being denied proper equipment, their struggles tells a bigger story about the systemic neglect, institutional barriers and societal biases. Drawing on moments from Copa 71 and the hidden footage of an untold story, will highlight the inequalities faced by women and how these barriers represent far more than just a lack of funding. They reveal how deeply ingrained gender inequalities are and how they've shaped the sport. Today we'll examine how resilience emerged from repression and how women carved a space in the game, even when everything seemed against them. So obviously last episode we went through it's kind of some of the accounts of the players, and we'll very much draw up upon a lot of those today. Let's just start with kind of what will overarch the theme of this episode. It is really the power relations that stand at the top of the game that actually often limit and put a stop and a hold to the progress of the women's side of football. You know, the amount of men that have said to me in the past, you know, well, women need to do this and women need to do that if they want to see a change in the game. And I can never, you know, I'll fight till I'm black and blue in the face when I say that women have been doing everything they can for years, but they're stopped at every hurdle by men who sit higher up in the game and stop them.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, that's exactly it. The women of Copa did exactly what they needed to do. They were dedicated. They trained hard. They made their own way to be able to get to the tournament. They weren't relying upon anyone, and they didn't take from anyone to get themselves there. So they had everything that they were told that they need to, but unfortunately, there was still barriers put in their paths, even before the final of Copa 71 was able to commence. So even during the competition, this was still happening. They were in the middle of a World Cup and still battling with these issues.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it was all, you know, remote or strictly through the football governance and how that was dominated by men, and how, you know, we look at this decision making at the top of the game, and, you know, I'll use the phrase old boys networks. So FIFA's conservative leadership labelled women's football as disreputable and unsuitable, which of course stalled the progress of the game, not just during the Copa tournament, but obviously for decades after. So we are, of course, very pleased to announce that at the end of our series, we will in fact be speaking to the historian within the BBC documentary, David Goldblatt, who has, you know, kindly agreed to come on and speak to us. But he, when speaking in the documentary, said the men in charge celebrated masculine virtues while dismissing women's football as immodest and unnecessary.
Yeah. And they didn't hide it. They didn't make it a secret that that's what it was. And in terms of sort of how the women of Copa could have gone against that, or women, it's just hard. It was just so hard for them to be able to, because they didn't have a voice. So those men could have said, for any reason, we're banning football or big events for football, or we don't want this sport to grow. And women just simply had to accept that for what it was, because we think we haven't got a voice today, but back in them days it was 20 times harder. It was way harder. And women, I'm going to say, weren't as daring, weren't as strong. And no, I say not all women, the majority of women, I don't think could stand together, and because they just didn't have rights. And I think those men at the top knew that. The women haven't got those rights, so we'll say whatever we want and they'll do it.
Well, actually, whether or not people would necessarily recognise it, we still see a lot of the same kind of control and dominance at the top, and the effects that has on the progress of the game trickle down today. Like, you look at I was looking at some stats on a paper that had been released a couple of years ago, an academic paper, that claimed that through its research and the digging that it did, grassroots programs for girls still lack funding and facilities compared to boys' programs. And it's just like, why is that? There's, what was it, 40? I think it's 40,000 youth girls have registered with an affiliated football club since the Lionesses won the Euros. So there is a huge influx of players. There shouldn't be any funding issues. There is more money now we are seeing starting to be pumped into the game, even at grassroots level. For what reason are we not funding just as much on both sides of the game? And, we still see this even more so in other countries, for other nations, wherein you could argue that when you look back at Copa, England was, although not privileged, and we still didn't have the backing, we still had more than what other nations had when they were having to take their self away to Mexico for the Euros, for the Copa.
Yeah, and it's really sad. Just like with the Spanish women's football team being successful and winning the World Cup. I mean, what an achievement, winning a World Cup for your country. And how the whole thing got overshadowed by the FIFA president, funnily enough, non-consensually planting a kiss on the lips of the captain, who it was meant to be her most special moment of her life. And imagine the most fantastic moment of your life being overshadowed by misogyny.
Yeah, but isn't that just a more overarching representation of women in the game, full stop? Like, let's just look at me or you, for example. How many times has something football related that should have been one of the most enjoyable things you did, and it's the thing you enjoyed doing the most, how many times has that been overshadowed because of male misogynistic behaviour?
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing. It's Copa 71 footage was hidden.
Yeah.
Why? Because women were successful. The success of the Spanish football team winning the World Cup was overshadowed by a man, by the FIFA president, who then began to defend his actions. I'm sorry, okay, but if the FIFA president, okay, was to plant a kiss on the male Spanish captain after winning, okay, the World Cup, because the Spanish men's team won the World Cup, as we saw. I think there'd be absolute uproar. I
Yeah,
don't
but you
think
just wouldn't do
it'd
it.
be
Why
indifferent.
you
Well, that's
wouldn't kiss
it. Yeah.
a man
Well,
on the
there we go.
lips? Why would you kiss women on the lips?
Yeah, because it's a player. It's a player. Whether it's a man or a woman, it's a player. And guess what? Consent is a thing. But because she's a woman in a sport where women aren't regarded highly, he thought he could do whatever he wants. So what's changed now between Copa 71 and Women's World Cups today?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we've got to look at is, like in the final segment, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but just another example of where this has happened. I won't go into the details right now, but Mary Earps winning Sports Personality of the Year.
Yeah.
That it was not her winning Sports Personality of the Year that made it. It was what she was wearing, or that it should not have been Mary Earps that won it.
Yep.
And it's just things like this. But we can only hope in terms of going forward with leadership and governance in football that we might see some change. Obviously the introduction of the WPLL, the Women's League, where they have claimed for the majority of the leadership team to be female. We can only assume and hope that this is going to be positive.
Yeah.
We can only hope for it. I mean, again, someone said to me the other day, or made a comment about punditry. There's always this outroar. Why can't we have more? Why is it always men on women's football, and why can't we more women? But why is there always women in men's football? Well, I don't see the problem, because everywhere you go, in every kind of managerial perspective, you'll never find a full female leadership team. It will never happen.
But also, why are men complaining? Because they apparently hate women talking about men's football anyway. No,
I'm gonna.
sorry. They apparently hate women's football anyway. So why do they want to commentate on it? Why do they want equal rights to comment on something that they supposedly hate, think is a joke, and women shouldn't be doing it? Women want to commentate on men's football because guess what? Women see it as a sport and they enjoy it and they want to commentate.
There's a comment that I've got to bring up later, that because you said, oh no, men don't like speaking about women's football, but actually men don't like women speaking about men's football. And we'll come to that later, because there is something interesting. I'm going to go to a quick ad break now. We'll go into that afterwards, actually. So it's an interesting point. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasts with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcast in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcast. So we obviously speak about the fight that it takes as a woman, the grit, the resilience, I think is the word that I've written down here the most. But obviously we have to acknowledge the underlying reasons that stem from this and why this is the case. The first things that come to my mind are undermining, sexualisation, cultural stigmas in the game. So, for example, from the documentary, they speak about how the UEFA governance had described this is the UEFA FIFA governance team. This isn't just a man in society. They dismissed women's football as comedic and erotic, and newspapers had reported them to have described women's football to be like a dog walking on its hind legs. Not well done, but surprising to see at all. I mean, how on earth can you look at that? You're animalising, you're sexualising, but there's no hope for the game. There's no hope to see anything change when it's being brought down and spoken about in such a way by the people at the top who are meant to be the people that, what's the word I'm looking for? The people that
Support, pioneer,
pioneer, support, regulate the way
regulate.
people behave.
Yeah, there we go. And
Do you see
and
what I'm saying?
yeah, exactly. And it's all had such a domino effect, because we can go back to one of our previous pods where we had to unfortunately speak about a horrible incident that a female fan had to endure, being assaulted by a man whilst he was with his two sons. This behavior filters down and is never stamped out. That's the problem. It's never stamped out, it's never called out. And people are thinking, well, if he's doing it, what, I can do it.
I won't get into trouble for doing it because he's not.
The guy at the top's doing it. Look at the we go back to the FIFA incident again. The FIFA president is assaulting the female. She's an athlete. She's a female sport athlete captaining her country. Okay, one of the biggest moments in for Spain as a country. Also, the Wimbledon was won by Spain in within the same few days, or it might have even been the same day. Would he have been treated like that? He's regarded as a king. These women should be regarded highly, but the person right at the top has just absolutely violated her in front of millions of people around the world. What are people sitting at home going to think? Well, he's got
No,
no respect for
literally.
them.
No, exactly. So therefore, it's okay for us because he's setting the premise. He's setting the tone here for everybody else.
Of course he is. He's FIFA president, like you said. They regulate how people should behave within the game, how people need to be treated in the game. They should be setting an example. He's the head of one of the highest organizations there can be. Why are you setting that sort of example to millions of people there? Small little boys. I remember watching that final. And I watched it with my whole family. My nephews were there. We sat as a family and made it an event, just like we do the men's World Cup finals.
Yeah.
And I remember my nephew, who must have been about 13 at the time, literally remember this, him saying, "Whoa, did you just see what happened there?" And it was so embarrassing, because I'm not going to lie, I have to fight within my family to prove why women's football is just as good as men. I have lots of males in my family that we all love football. We all love football. I'm the only female in my family. And I will talk about women's football. I'll say, as we're talking as a family, we'll all talk about the football, and I'll say, "Oh, did you see the women's game? Did you see England women's? Did you see the international games?" And like I said, I made it a point to all sit down. We were together this summer to watch this game and celebrate it. And a couple of males in my family are receptive to it and really respectful, but the majority are just like, but it's not as good as men's football, is it? And the first thing a 13-year-old, my nephew said, "Well, that would never happen in the men's game."
Exactly, because it just wouldn't.
And then it just shatters everything that I've built up, the respect that I've built up for the women's game, trying to portray to my family, look, these women are athletes, they love the game just as much as the men, they're brilliant. And something like that's happening. And
it just makes it look totally irrelevant and so subpar again. And it's just like, why do I bother?
yeah, it just made everyone look stupid. And there's a documentary about it, which We're
Which I
definitely
was just about to say to anyone listening to any of our other podcasters on here, we have put a big stamp on that, and that is ours, so keep your hands off, please.
we're definitely going to be covering that.
Yeah.
And it's again just, when are we going to get to cover a documentary that has shown women's football in a positive light, where it's been respected and incredible? Like, I'm waiting for that day.
Yeah, exactly. On which note, we'll continue that after this ad break.
Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all the ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Yeah, so you talk about waiting for that day. Something that I was going to mention a moment ago. So you also used the word a minute ago, something that is being shown to millions. And it is. Everyone sees it. We're trying to promote women's football on the bigger stage, but by doing so, it also means that these disparities and these embarrassing things and these undermining things that still happen to women in the game also get seen by millions. And for example, the BBC recently did a survey finding that athletes still face inappropriate and disproportionately inappropriate comments and objectification on social media more than they do direct feedback about football. That's absolutely mind-blowing. So they receive more inappropriate comments on social media than they do feedback about the football they're playing, the reason they're there. I mean, fine, BBC, you've done that survey, but what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? How do we tackle this massive issue? I mean, that stat there is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Nothing positive about that at all. And we talk about mental health through players and the battles that the female players have with mental health, whilst facing a lot of backlash from the community, from everyone that sees them. And we talk about things that they can do and clubs can put into place, etc. But you can do so much, take so many precautions and put so many things in place, but all it will take is for them to pick up their phone, swipe or read something, and
Yep.
all of that can be undone in
seconds.
less than a second.
Yeah.
And all I can think about is, thank God these women of Copa 71 didn't have access to social media to see what people were saying about them during the World Cup. Because although the documentary celebrates it, which it's absolutely to be celebrated, I can only imagine, if we had social media today, the comments and remarks that would be made.
Isn't it? And, I want to come to a point here where actually all that we ever receive, whether it's on social media or in person or indirectly in the environment we're in as female players, coaches, referees, whatever that is negativity or judgment or undermining comments, anything like that. And actually on this podcast, we recently have received a handful of really positive messages regarding the podcast network and what we're doing. And I sat there the other day and I thought, just those few really positive comments about what we're doing mean so much. But it's also sad that it means that much, and that, I don't know about you, but I get so excited just to get the odd nice comments. Like, it should be normal.
You almost get taken back by it, because
I get dopamine from it because I'm not used to that.
It's not what you expect, and that's the thing. If we can think if female players got more positive feedback like that, it would want them to push. It would push them to want to improve their game and play better football for the public to watch. But if you're already starting off on the back foot in something, which as a female playing football, you're already on the back foot,
Yeah.
then you're being told by the people that are meant to, because in men's football, we were only just saying about the Plymouth game, the fans
Yeah.
being behind
Exactly.
the players absolutely spurred them on and ultimately probably got them the win. And don't get me wrong, I know fans that attend matches in women's game are absolutely fantastic. But going back to social media as well, like, why do people feel it's okay to hide behind their screens and their keyboards and attack these women in this way?
Well,
And
that leads on really nicely to what I was going to say. Sorry, were you going to say something else?
no, go for it.
I was going to say that leads on really nicely to when Mary Earps won Sports Personality of the Year, BBC Sports Personality. And actually, the only thing that was focused on was what she was wearing. I don't know if you remember this.
Mm-hmm.
But she wore a dress that some people deemed slightly revealing. My personal opinion, I don't think there was anything wrong with it. It was modest enough. But who cares? It really wasn't about that. It was in no way, shape, or form relevant. And not only was that an issue, was she sexualized more than she was praised for what happened. It caused a massive uproar with Piers Morgan and Joey Barton at the time, wherein Joey Barton, really ex-footballer, current, I think he's Bristol Rovers manager now, ex-England player, and he got on his real high horse about it, and he really wasn't happy. And the misogyny that he so bluntly and blatantly put out on social media, he was brave enough to start claiming that he could score 1,000 spot kicks in a row against Mary Earps, and suggested that an England men's and women's teams playing a game would result in a cricket score. Obviously, not only disregarding the skills of players like Earps, but also perpetuating that idea in women's football of inferior. It's just trying to make women feel inferior. And, he also said, which is what I was saying about earlier, women are not qualified to speak about men's football.
Wow. He has a
Like,
daughter, right? I hope she grows up to want to be a football pundit. And then
does he have a daughter?
he has a daughter. Yeah.
Well, it's and I remember him at the time she won it, and obviously the issue is that a lioness had won it the year before as well. My
Right.
argument is great, 2 years in a row, and people are like that's not fair, that can't happen. It's like, well, it is, because it's the fair winner. And he and Piers Morgan too were very kind of like, what's she done? She doesn't deserve it. And it was, hang on a moment. She got to a World Cup final where she saved a penalty against Spain. She was incredible in that tournament. And when you look at her personal profile that year, she won every award under the sun in women's football. She had about a list of about 12 individual awards. She won the Golden Glove at the World Cup. What do you mean she's not won anything? She doesn't deserve this. That is absolutely diabolical. That is just such a ridiculous statement.
She's inspired young girls all around the world, young
Yeah.
keepers all around the world. She's the first female footballer to have a waxwork at Madame Tussauds.
Yes.
She,
I really want to see that.
yeah, we'll have to do a little trip. um, she, and again, it's just men like Piers Morgan and Joey Barton are just the issue, because I
It just
bet,
echoes the dismissiveness that this women had in Copa 71 as well.
yeah, exactly. And I just think, do you know what, mate? If you look at the facilities that women get compared
Mm.
to men,
And they're
yeah,
still
no
performing to
wonder.
that level. It's
Yeah,
so respectable.
exactly. The game has been halted because of men like you for so many years. We're
Yeah.
essentially now starting from scratch. So watch this space. And you know what? The more you speak negatively about women's football, the more it's going to push all of us on to absolutely prove you wrong and keep your mouth shut in the future.
Do you know, I love that.
It's
That
just
was,
ridiculous.
it really is, and you know, we are pretty much at the end of time. But you know, I just hope that going forward, things like Copa, you know, are this, you know, constant reminder of, you know, what as women we and women are capable of achieving in the environment and in the space despite it all. But also that the whole Copa 71 story serves as a warning about the long-term effects of systemic governing neglect. And yeah, I think we'll leave it at that for today.
Yes. We look forward to episode 4.
Episode 4, wow. That's halfway mark, that.
It's been fun. Thank you
Has
for
been
listening,
fun.
guys. And if you haven't had a chance to watch the documentary yet, please jump on and watch it.
Do you know, I was waiting for you to say that. That's like your trademark line at the end of all of these episodes now.
You know, I've both watched it a couple of times each. And yeah, it gets better every time. And I think if you watch it and come back and tune into the next 4 episodes with us, you'll feel our frustrations, you'll feel our happiness, you'll feel all the emotions with us. So yeah, jump on that, guys.
Like I say, just a reminder as well that we have got David Goldblatt, historian from the documentary, coming on to speak with us, providing all goes to plan, so that'll be fun. But yeah, for now, thank you for joining us, and we will look forward to welcoming you back to our next episode of Beyond the Pitch.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
I'm dying.